Welcome back to Backroom Talk. This season, we're bringing you behind-the-scenes conversations with awesome coaches who are shaping the future of fitness. I'm your host, Candice Dixon, CMO of OPEX and CoachRx. In this episode, I sit down with Mizar Fuente Ortega as he shares his journey from elite gymnast and engineer to becoming a coach who prioritizes health over performance. Mizar dives into his personal experience with competitive burnout and how it has shaped his approach to building foundational strength for clients while helping them more deeply connect to their why while making fitness a part of their everyday lives for long-term success. He walks us through the evolution of his coaching methodology from understanding individual client needs to creating supportive relationships that foster growth. What really shines through is his emphasis on the joy of witnessing client progress and the importance of embracing the growth process, both as a coach as well as alongside your clients. Whether you're a career coach or thinking about coaching as your next move, this episode is packed with insights that you can put into action right away. All right, let's jump into my chat with Mizar. Well, hello, welcome.
Thank you, Candice.
Thank you for crashing into our last episode recording with Robin. I understand from my conversation with him, which was awesome, that you were his longtime coach.
Yes, I was his last coach, actually. He was being coached by Sam Smith, and then I started working with him, and now I feel that he's a lot more autonomous. His last share on Instagram about basically reconnecting with his priorities. He used to train at noon and focus on, the peak of his testosterone and cortisol and, where he's more alert in order to perform. And now he needs to realize, or he realized that priorities change. He still need to take care of his body, maintain himself, strength, endurance, power, or whatever his, holistic approach means to him. But I'm happy to see that, he basically reorganized his daily movement, to maximize.
You are going to be a very proud coach listening to his episode when it releases because he's just doing some really great things. And I'm sure that that's a lot of your influence has shaped what he's doing now. So that you're going to enjoy it.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Well, Mizar, tell us about you. I would love to start with just a little bit about who you are and your journey to becoming a coach.
Yeah, I started as a gymnast, actually. When I was 7 years old, I started gymnastics. For a gymnast, that's actually quite old to start gymnastics at that age. Particularly that I had aspirations of becoming, an athlete or an Olympian. Going to the Olympics had been a big dream of mine. And it started with that, gymnastics into coaching gymnastics. So I coached for many years, and that led me to practice rock climbing, weightlifting, CrossFit. That's how I met James Fitzgerald. And basically, he brought a bit like Robin, this same kind of mentorship, as in awareness, as in it's not just about, lifting weights and the PRs and CrossFit and doing Fran, and, it goes beyond that. And I remember exactly that, like after you finish CrossFit or after you finish competing, what's next? Are you in love with the process of staying healthy, being a healthy human being? Or what does that even mean, being healthy? Is it just about cholesterol and heart rate? Or vitality, hormones, like James used to say, happy, hungry, horny? And so through that process, sometimes I had some guidance. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, to get stronger or to become a better gymnast, or just if I was nourishing my body properly. And so through that, I was doing an engineering degree. I am a mechanical engineer. I have a specialization in biomedical engineering. And I feel that that's the mindset that kind of separates me from other trainers, as in without judging what, data is, seeing what are the trends and what are principles. Ultimately, that's what, comes up. The more you discover what are the principles to be healthy or to perform or to train, you kind of start understanding this pattern. And basically, with the guidance of James and other mentors, I decided to let go of the engineering. I decided to really focus 100% onto the coaching aspect. Initially, it was more about becoming an athlete and, like I said, being an Olympian. That did not happen, but that's where I found martial arts. That's where I found CrossFit. And that's where I saw that, ultimately sometimes we put too much emphasis into the performance, into the medals, and we forget about what actually, being healthy truly means. We believe that, or I used to believe that being on the podium every single competition meant that I was super healthy and, I was the most athletic person. But when I actually became an athlete and pushed into those levels, I realized that I wasn't necessarily that healthy. I was, shoulder injury, hip pain, lower back, being exhausted, needing to take a nap. And yeah, I mean, that's the big awareness process, as in how much do you need to do in order to maintain yourself? We need to have some sort of discomfort, in order to maintain your muscle mass, or you need to do some cardio in order to keep your aerobic capacity, because if we come to realize, the demands of our physical body have decreased. COVID showed us that we could be inside for months, getting deliveries from Amazon and Uber and not stepping outside and not having to do much effort, as opposed to, before, where we used to be in the fields or hunting or whatever. So I feel that we have this amazing gift of movement, of, being able to accomplish whatever. And it's up to us to actually make this as a lifestyle. The same way you take a shower in the morning or brush your teeth, the same way we need to nourish the body and move the body and, you know, take care of it. Yeah.
What point in your athlete pursuit did you make that paradigm kind of pivot? And what did it come with age, or was there an event that occurred that made you have that reflection and pivot?
There was an event. I actually burned out. I was an engineer full time, and I believed that if I would train like an athlete, I was going to be very successful. And I came to realize that I was burning the candle from both ends. And that's when the moment of realization happened, as in, okay, I'm a good athlete, I'm pushing hard, I'm competing quite often, and yet I'm not healthy. I didn't feel necessarily energized. Yeah, okay, competition, 3, 2, 1, go. Cortisol levels increase, adrenaline increase. Or you get a slap in the face and you just go into beast mode. That's where I actually realized that the mind is so powerful and can push the body beyond its limits. And the limits are quite far. So yeah, with the coach, with James, we sat down and had these conversations, as in, okay, why are we doing all of this? Initially it was for, how do you say, accomplish something. Being successful. You need to graduate, you need to have a job, you need to have a house, and all of those material things. And it goes beyond that. And when you have those, but you don't have your health, that's where you start kind of like wandering around. Why do I need this financial security? Not that you don't need money. We need money. Not that you don't need a house. You need a roof under your head. You might get with the food and all of those things we do on a daily basis. And that's exactly what the reflection came up. Is in, what are the essential things I need to survive, to live, and to thrive? And at that point, that's where I was like, okay, now I'm in survival mode. What are the changes I need to make into my daily life in order to live and thrive as a human being? And that was the point where I realized that engineering served me my purpose, as in it allowed me to hire a coach, hire a nutritionist, hire a masotherapist, buy supplements, take some courses, educate myself. And that's what gave me the courage eventually. Initially, I felt a bit like a fraud. "Oh, now I'm a coach, but I studied engineering. And the great thing is that I was always following my passion, with the biomedical engineering. I wanted to understand how the body moved, how the body operated. I didn't realize that actually I was kind of merging the whole thing to create a better understanding of the principles. And
How many years ago was that you decided to leave engineering behind and pursue coaching full time?
that was 15 years ago. Yeah, I burnt out. I worked part time as a coach. Actually, I've always worked part-time as a coach. It was my hobby. And when I came to realize is that I was actually becoming a better coach, crafting my art, and the engineering was kind of supporting all of this throughout the process. My vacations were a competition in Arizona or, in Florida. And I would, go to a weightlifting competition, in the States or, in Canada throughout, the provinces. And same idea with the CrossFit, that was my investment for myself. And yeah, when I burnt out, I made the choice. Just a bit like we were talking about Robin, I was dreaming of the day that I would wake up, have my breakfast. I could go, coach a couple of people and train around 10, 11 o'clock. And now I'm living that. I can take ownership of my schedule, decide when is a bad moment for me to, maximize the time that I'm moving. No, I'm not an athlete anymore. I'm not doing 2 sessions a day, 3 sessions sometimes on a weekend. But I really appreciate, that freedom that I have with regards of, moving when I can, dedicating some time for education, for coaching, for learning. Yeah, that was the moment that basically triggered everything.
Well, I know because you always sound so zen and calm, cool, collected, but you have a lot going on because outside of remote coaching, which you do, you also own a gym and do mentorship and really support a lot of the coaches in our community who are going through the education. So it's not a little that's on your plate, but you you definitely get to manage it very well and organize your day to find fulfillment and do the things that you want to do. But take us down that path of the evolution from deciding you want to go to coaching full time to then starting to coach and then how your career has sort of unfolded to where it is today.
Yeah, well, it started with gymnastics. When I was a student, I would go to school and they would offer me to coach on a Sunday morning, the recreational classes. And that's where I started actually loving coaching because it was with kids that never had, done gymnastics or were not too much aware of how to move their body. And seeing the progress in so little time, that's what got me hooked up. And later on, university, same idea. I kept coaching. And when I graduated and I became an engineer, I always kept a toe on the sharing the knowledge. And eventually, when I decided to quit engineering, that's where I planned. As simple as that. I was in work leave for a couple of months, and that gave me the space to gradually pick up more hours. I was actually coaching in 2 different gyms. I was, mornings, taking all the shifts that no one wanted to take, either early mornings or late evenings. And throughout the day, that's where I would coach, and that's where I would actually start planning opening up a gym. I was looking for different spaces. I was, looking for equipment, making some budgets, permits, plans. Uh, so basically, little by little, I start having a bit more clients, and that's where I go back to realizing what do we actually need in order to survive. That to me, that was a big like, okay, financially, I need this much to for my rent, for my food, for my other activities. What are those? Training, either martial arts, having some time for myself, either once in a while going to a restaurant, is that actually necessarily? Is that into the surviving, living, or thriving? And when I realized these different kind of buckets, that's when I gained the courage. When I actually had a plan, what's the budget to open up a gym? What's the rent on a monthly basis? And when I figured it out, I was like, okay, this is possible. And I found the space, start doing the renovations. It was pretty basic at the time when I started. That was what, 15 years ago, where it used to be a CrossFit gym to begin. At the beginnings of CrossFit, it was more like a dungeon, a garage gym, into an industrial building. basically that's where things start to happen. Having more time to coach with people, having more conversations beyond, okay, I want to lose weight and I want to get a bit leaner. What does it mean for, mom and pop? What does it mean for an elder person? What does it mean for a teenager or for actually a client that wants to perform? Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, because now you do multiple things, right? With remote coaching and owning your gym, and you guys just moved into a beautiful new facility, and then also you do support mentorship on the education side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would put it as in it's connecting with individuals. I feel that the knowledge that I've gained, it's important to share it, through my personal experience, through the courses that I've taken, through the mentors, and even the people that we meet, they have different perspective. And yeah, I mean, the evolution from the CrossFit gym to now happened through COVID. That's where there was the main opening of my mind into the individual design, because I saw that the people needed a bit more specific approach as opposed to the 20, 30 group class where if you have a back pain or shoulder pain, if you want to lose weight, if you want to gain muscle, if you want to prepare for the opens or do a triathlon or do an Ironman or do a marathon or you name it, we all have a different specific goal. And when we open the new space, it really allows us to align ourselves, as in we really want to connect with each person, because we realize that we have different backgrounds, we have different beliefs. If we think of nutrition, there's some people that are vegetarian, there's some people that eat a bit more meat, and there's somewhere in between. But when you understand the principles, then you can connect a bit better with, yes, a vegetarian, but still needs to have enough protein to survive, if we can say that. If they want to thrive, if they want to increase their muscle mass to be a bit more lean, where they need to start making choices. And that's the connection we want to make with them in the new space. And remotely, what I saw through COVID is that we can connect with people around the world, that they are looking for coaches that can guide them. Because through TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, some of them are going to tell you to eat watermelon for a month and you're going to lose weight. Another one is going to tell you to do intermittent fasting for 7 days in a row, 16 hours nonstop, and basically they're starving themselves. And yeah, they're losing weight, but sooner or later is going to lead to either an eating disorder or, extremes are going to always come back to other extremes. So I cut carbs, I put just protein. I cut protein, I just have vegetables. And not that I'm against vegetables or protein, it's just that there are different nutrients that we need them into our digestive system and, for vitamins, for minerals, for you name it. And it's important that they're there. So connecting in person in this space is amazing because we can actually have interaction, real time. Online, it's also amazing because we can connect people from Germany, from China, from the States, from Mexico, from all over the world, and assist them, where they're at. And the beauty with this is that we can actually make a kind of a combination of all of them. Because with COVID, we realized that some people don't come to the office every day, or maybe they come 2 to 3 times a week downtown, and then 2 times a week they stay at home. But their health, it's still there for them every day. So if you don't have access to a leg press or a barbell or a rack or some weights, maybe you have a bike at home, maybe you have some light dumbbells, and you can still have some tools in order to maintain your vitality, keep your health. Either you're 70 years old or you're 15 years old. What does that look like? So with that hybrid model, it allows us to assist them, step by step on a daily basis. Now there's no more excuses. Now it's really, okay, what do you want and what are the decisions that you make on a daily basis in order to keep moving forward? So that's part of the remote, on-site, and the coaching aspect. I realize that there's different, I don't want to say levels or awareness points. As individuals, I used to be a client myself. I still am a client. I'm learning deep diving. I'm learning jujitsu. And I love it because, I'm becoming a white belt. I'm like a beginner's mind, learning something new that I can share with my clients or coaches that I assist through the certification program. I realized that the questions that I used to have, a lot of people have them. Younger coaches, okay, how the fuck am I supposed to make a living out of this? They think that I finished my CCP course and now I'm gonna have like people jumping over me to get coach. Or, I can just knock on the door of a gym and they're gonna open their facilities for me to get hired and have like a big paid job right at the beginning. But, the reality is that, we need to invest ourselves and we need to create that day by day. So having that feedback, I feel it's important. I had the great opportunity to work with different mentors that showed me the way, and I feel that it's important to have that support system. So OPEX to me has been very good to me. It has given me the tools to grow, to learn, to expand, and I feel that we need to elevate each other. As opposed to feel that we're competition and taking and punching each other away. We need to create that support system that, just like Robin, now he's in Marrakesh and he's, assisting other individuals. That's amazing. We need more of these. We need to assist more people because the health of the worldwide population, it's uh, it's quite bad.
Absolutely. I don't know if all our listeners will know this. We've obviously made a lot of iterations to the CCP education over the years. But about a year ago, we made the commitment to evolving our mentorship program from being a group mentorship program to being a one-on-one mentorship. So if you go in through the OPEX CCP education, at a certain point, you'll be ready for mentorship and you'll sign up for a 6-week block. And we have a number of our head coaches, head education coaches who provide that mentorship. I guess, Mizar, what I wanted you to be able to share with people is what are the types of things you're working on with those coaches that come into the mentorship? What questions do they have? How are you sort of meeting them where they're at? And what does it look like to work with you in the mentorship?
Yeah, it really depends on each coach's starting point because some of them, they just want to understand a bit better about progressions. How do I get this person to do a pull up, for example, or how do I get this person to get a bit stronger? They need to back squat their body weight or 2 times the body weight. So understanding the different training principles. So it's really on a case by case, and that's what's so powerful. The fact that it becomes a bit more individualized. Or for example, a coach that just finished and that wants to own an OPEX gym. What are the different steps? So just knowing what is your budget. How much is the rent? Do you need like an insurance? Do you need how much equipment do you need? Are you planning to have 3, 5, 8, 10 people? That makes a big difference. And when people starting to have concrete steps to move forward, it appears a bit more realistic because you have a plan. Now, it's not just like, oh, I wish I had like $1 million to open up a gym. No, maybe it's not $1 million that you need. Maybe you can start a bit smaller. If you have access to a gym, or maybe you can have 2, 3, 5, 10 clients that are going to allow you to have that peace of mind that, first of all, you're evolving the direction you want to. And second, now you have more resources to get moving. Have that down deposit on the rent or have that initial payment for the equipment that you're looking for. That too, or just simply lifestyles. Us as coaches, we're human beings too. And, it does get hectic having a gym, training, then you add the family, then you add the kids, and then add some travels. If you want to actually do some competition, it's extra that you're adding. And sometimes it feels that we need to do more in order to be successful. And the reality is that we need to choose better the presence or the quality of presence that we're putting into every single step that we're doing. I don't feel that I'm doing, I guess, a lot of things, but the things that I do is because I want to do them and I do them in quality of presence. If I'm with you for an hour, I'm with you for an hour. I plan that time. I try to connect myself early. Sorry for disturbing the podcast before, but it's more about that connection that I want to have with each individual to really understand where they're at and see what kind of I assist with them, with my experience as a coach, with my experience as a gym owner, working remote. It's not the same as, doing an assessment in person where you can actually correct the person as you go or, give better instructions as opposed to sending a video, waiting for a day or two, and then starting the process. So how do you create those relationships where you have a Zoom call with them every month and review the videos? And then, it's a process that eventually we all find our rhythm, but having a guide of like, okay, check this out, you haven't received any feedback for a week, what's going on? Maybe the person is just, losing interest or they change interests or, they got injured or family things happen. How can we assist them through that process without necessarily getting overwhelmed as in, the client sends you a message at midnight and you need to change the program for the next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. Maybe if it's competition and, we've had an agreement, but, someone that texts you, 5 minutes ago and you need to answer within the next minute, sometimes it can become draining. So yeah, that's.
How do you balance, or does it take different parts of your personality or your brain to run the day to day in the gym and coach clients live in that setting versus working with your remote clients or mentoring other coaches through our education program?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I have also my priorities. I have some times where, for example, the gym, I have certain times where I'm most productive or most aware in the morning. So everything that requires numbers, everything that requires emails or important things to do, it's going to be in the morning. Coaching to me, it's something a bit natural where I've been doing it so often that the fact that it's also individualized, I find it actually light. Talking with people, interacting with people, see how they move. It's just how do you say, a relationship, and I don't want to say it's necessarily a friend, but yeah, sometimes we create these bonds that, the person comes in, you see their energy is different or how they walk or even how, hey, how are you doing? A bit tired. So you can kind of adjust what I had planned for them to do. The mentorship also, I'm not available every day either. And that's why it's important to set up your limits. In a day, we have 24 hours. And like I said, it's bringing awareness to what are my essential things that I cannot dismiss. Within that, for me, it's sleep. I try to have regular hours of sleep. I can understand that sometimes things happen. I'm not going to go to bed at 9, 10. And sometimes I need to wake up earlier. And that's, I guess, adjusting as it comes. And I made peace with that because I'm not an athlete anymore. I used to kind of stressed out. Oh my God, it's 9 and I'm still not in bed, and it's 9:30 and I'm not gonna have my 10 hours of sleep, and then it kind of gets even more obsessive. So making peace with what I can control, that has helped a lot. Same idea with the nutrition. Setting up certain times where I'm like, look, if I'm not nourishing my body, I'm gonna feel it later on. And that's my own commitment to myself. Because, yeah, I could do fasting for 5, 6, 8, 12. I've done even 7 days of fasting, which, anyway, that's another podcast. But basically, it's to understanding that these to me are things that are essential to have my mental clarity in order to have my energy. Sometimes if you don't eat throughout the day and you expect to have energy to do your training, it's not going to be necessarily great. And the same idea with the remote coaching, like, okay, I need to sit down, review comments, review videos, write the program. And those to me are also exciting because, you kind of see the evolution throughout the week. In like, usually I do that, let's say on a Wednesday or on a Thursday, where there's some trainings already done that I can actually review that. But really, I was going to say finding your own rhythm, finding your own what makes sense to you. There's some people that feel are more productive or more creative in the evening. Perfect. Recognize that. What does that mean to you?
Absolutely. When it comes to the clients that you're working with, those that are coming into the gym and those that are remote, I guess have you noticed any similarities or differences in the things that they're the problems you're solving for them as a coach, or the concerns they're coming to you with, are those different in the in-person setting and the remote setting, or the same? How are you navigating, or I guess what are those challenges that clients are coming to you for right now?
Yeah, I mean, I have a big spectrum of individuals. You know, I guess the experience that I've acquired through CrossFit, through gymnastics, through weightlifting, even my own, burning out, feeling, how do you say, lethargic, not having much energy, kind of needing a, kick in the butt to get yourself going. Sometimes we feel that we're lazy, that we're giving up, and the reality is that we're just maybe overdoing it, or maybe we're not sleeping enough, or maybe we're not eating enough. So yeah, I mean, the clients that I'm working with could be people that want to lose weight, like older women that are going through menopause, younger teenagers that basically are peaking in their testosterone and they want to get buffed, or um, uh, last one I had a woman in China that wanted to basically train for the opens, and she didn't have necessarily the mentorship, how to evolve with gymnastic skills or with weightlifting, part because of the language, part because of the accessibility of the equipment. So creating a specific plan for her that is not here. For people that are on site, it's a bit easier because we have pretty much all the equipment that you would need in order to develop yourself beyond your dreams. And yeah, I mean, that's what I find exciting, that sometimes you can have someone that is injured, has a knee pain, someone that is recovering from a stroke, someone that is completely fine and wants to just prepare for like a military test, a teenager that just wants to get better, playing basketball. So yeah, I mean, to me, that's where I'm like, I come in and what's new today? Oh, that's part of the, yeah, it's a routine. Okay, I'm gonna eat my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah, I'm gonna train at a certain hour. I'll have my little coffee. But throughout the day, there's so many things. Like, I wasn't expecting to meet Robin and having a little chit chat and sharing with you. It's exciting, I find.
What's your favorite part about coaching?
Favorite part about coaching is when people recognize that they've evolved. When people recognize that they are able to do things that they were not able to do at the beginning. To me, that gives me goosebumps because, yeah, I was part of the process, but between you and I didn't do anything. It was them coming in, being consistent, having the discomfort, being vulnerable, and pushing through that, evolving through that. And that first kind of aha moment is priceless because now they actually fall in love with the process. And that's where I'm like, okay, job's done. As in, now that they've understood, yeah, it's sometimes on a Monday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to come to the gym at -50 outside. It's dark. Why would you do that? Getting out of bed and freeze your ass off to go to the gym. But when they see that, that's where they kind of regain confidence. They regain, I guess, a realization of why they started in the first place. And sometimes, their goals of losing 5 pounds, they kind of fade away because they realize that it goes beyond that 5 pounds. It goes beyond that, look, I'm a little bit leaner, ready for the summer. Now they realize that they can actually go upstairs and not being, out of breath, or they can run and walk and climb a mountain and not, fear that the next day they won't be able to move. They actually realize that they're actually capable of way more. And that's where it's like, okay, now your mind is open. Now you understood a bit better of what you're doing and what are little things that you can change on a daily basis to continue that evolution, because it's never over. That little glimpse of wow allows them to carry on, I feel.
What, from a methodology standpoint, when you're working with a client and they go, I know you're going through the standard OPEX methodology from assessment to design and progression, and you're doing weekly check-ins and you're doing consults and they're getting results and these relationship is evolving over the years. Has there been anything within that flow of the client relationship that has changed, that you've changed, or that you've really learned from and evolved that would be worth sharing with other coaches?
Yeah, the programming aspect. As a engineering mind, things should make sense, as in a 4-week cycle, 8-week cycle, whatever. You're doing a marathon within 8 months, and you can kind of build up to the distance you need to run. But what I realize is that life happens, and yes, our plan to do like a progressive overload for 8 weeks. Sometimes you're sick for 1 week, and what do you do the next one? And understanding too that, things go through phases. So adapting that, I used to be very kind of into my way. You need to continue this, and we're going to go from 80% to 85, and now it's time to peak. Sometimes, yeah, it works. Out of 10, 1 out of 5 times. But the reality is that sooner or later, we need to start adapting through the process. And what I realize is the consistency sometimes is way more important than actually, the actual, I guess, peak progress. Don't get me wrong, if you need to run a marathon, by September 1st, you better do the most that you can to get into that distance, because September 1st happens. And that's it. That's out of my control. But throughout that process, understanding that life happens, and be a bit more forgiving, if we can say that. So that gives some kind of space to the person and allows them to realize, to recognize. Sometimes, they're feeling like shit and they can't run their 20 kilometers because they didn't sleep well, because they didn't eat well. That's a good learning. And for myself as a coach, I'm not there to whip them, for their faults, but more to bring awareness, as in, look, this happens. Maybe your kid was sick and you couldn't sleep because you were taking care of them. Awesome. I'm not gonna bully you to go for a run when you're exhausted, and maybe the best opportunity for you would be to just chill. Maybe go for a walk, maybe make sure that you're eating enough throughout the day. Maybe, recognize that tonight you will be a bit more tired, and you're gonna, set up yourself for success for the next day. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you specifically about skill acquisition because I know, obviously, with your background and specialty in gymnastics, we do have a lot, at least within our community, I'm aware of a lot of people who have focused on skill development, skill acquisition, always recognize, hey, Mizar is one of the best at progressing skill. And Mizar is the guy you go to when you want to learn the ways to get in the ins and outs of different skills, specifically when it comes to more on the gymnastic side. What are your favorite skills to work with clients on at all phases?
The skills, I would say their first pull up and their first dip, because usually that's a big milestone. Once you start gaining that upper body strength, that's where other levels in gymnastics open up. We talk about muscle ups where it's a bit more dynamic, but sometimes that time where, you go from 0 push ups, 0 pull ups, 0 dips, it could be quite some time, and that's where we need to realize that, first of all, do you have the right program that exposes you through that gradually? And sometimes I saw, CrossFit, okay, we are doing muscle ups. Well, we need to do muscle ups. And you need to do more and more and more. But we forget that maybe if we did some push ups, some pull ups, even some curls, because you're that weak, that we need to take other means to create that upper body strength. And I mean, if that's one way, awesome. So pull ups and dips, definitely.
The foundations.
Yeah.
Do you find that those clients that you're able to get excited about improving movement and skill acquisition and get their mind off of maybe more of the vanity goals that they maybe initially come into, how does that change the dynamic of the coach client relationship?
Yeah, well, that's why the assessment is so important. Let's say they ask me that they want to compete in CrossFit, but they're missing a couple of elements within the different movements, either muscle up, handstand walks, or, snatches at a certain weight. That actually, it's awesome because they recognize Now it's not what I think, it's not what you think, it's what it is. And from there, they can actually, okay, you want to do a muscle, but you can't do a pull-up. Even if we spend 10 hours a day trying to do pull-ups and I yell at you and it's not gonna succeed. We need to go back to small wins that are gonna set you up for bigger wins in the long run. And often the conversation is that they come in and they're like, okay, I have 6 weeks to get my first muscle up or to get, 10 unbroken butterfly pull-ups. And I'm like, okay, so where are we at today? What if it's, 10 months instead of, 10 weeks? And that's where I'm like, okay, is it true? Maybe it's 8 months, maybe it's, 2 years or five. And that it's hard to say, but it's hard to understand or to hear. And honestly, to me, that was a big, how do you say, eye opener when I first started working with James. I was like, look, I want to go to the CrossFit Games. And we did the assessment. And he's like, well, you'll never go to the games. You're just too small. You're too weak. I'm like 5'3". I weigh 145 pounds. I used to believe I was quite strong for my height and for my size, and I am. I am like, for my body weight, I'm really strong, but for the CrossFit standards, like it's not like a 465 deadlift. That's not going to win any, CrossFit deadlift competition. A clean and jerk at 275, at my body weight, it's quite impressive, but that's a warm up for someone that is snatching 275. So that that honesty, actually, that's what I appreciated because it allowed me to position myself into the reality of what it meant to compete in CrossFit. And it allowed me also to choose, do I want to pursue that endeavor? And the answer was yes. Despite of him saying that I wasn't going to make it, I was willing and open to the process. Okay, if it's mean going to the regionals, I'm open for it. I'm open to learn and, live the process. And that's why I am today, to be able to share that experience. Yes, there's principles. Yes, there's, strength protocols, and yes, there's life events. Having been through that gives me another layer of understanding. Like I said, waking up in the morning at 6 o'clock to come and train because you have another training, at noon and then another in the evening. What does it mean? If you're doing a full-time job, what does it mean? How are you going to eat through that? How are you going to recover for the next day? So yeah, that honesty, that openness as starting from the assessment to where we're at today and where we need to be in whatever goal is.
Absolutely. It's very interesting to see that. I mean, obviously the trends they're always flowing through, and the last several years there's been so much evolution and actually paying homage back to previous sports and competitive outlets in the industry with kind of a revival of like boxing back, over the last several years, and that became really big, and then MMA has just grown. So, the amount of younger athletes or athletes of all ages that are entering jiu-jitsu for the first time and finding a lot of mental challenge there. And now we have sort of this resurgence of building from CrossFit, but a kind of more back traditional endurance sports with the rise of high rocks. I guess how are those trends impacting the clients that you're working with and the conversations that you're having with your clients?
Yeah, it goes back to basic principles. I see it in jiu-jitsu and I see it in all or many sports. We coach a couple of teenagers that are track and field. We coach a couple of teenagers that do ice skating, figure skating. And yes, there's the skills that they develop, at a younger age, just like me in gymnastics. But there's also, I feel that we're forgetting that we're human beings that need to evolve. And we need to be exposed to those things. For example, let's think of jujitsu. Jujitsu, I've seen that the beginners lack of that foundation, as in doing a plank, doing a lunge, doing a squat, doing a push-up, a pull-up, a dip, which is basic
Strength and
strength
conditioning.
movements. Let's say it's the kindergarten level of fitness. And then we ask them to now we're fighting an individual that could be your body weight or not, It could be a older man, that has more size and experience, and you're starting with, first of all, not the same level of experience and not the same level of strength and
Awareness.
conditioning. So sometimes we throw them into the fire, as in survive or die, natural selection. And that's often what happens. And I find it sad because I love jujitsu. And I would definitely feel that if instead of them trying to train 5 or 6 times a week, martial arts, jujitsu, kickboxing, they would do 2 or 3 times of skill development, as in, okay, learning how to kick, throwing a punch or grapple a bit, takedowns, submissions. Yeah, being knowing what it means to have someone on your back, or having someone pushing on your belly or trying to crank your neck. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good learnings to that. But there's also a lot of benefits to taking a moment where you don't have that external stress, and really you can kind of go in and build your body for those type of unpredictable demands. It could be skating, as in, now I'm doing a triple jump and I need to land on, thin piece of metal and land my landing and pursue that for 2 or 3 minutes. Or I'm like a 14-year-old female trying to, do changes in direction, and I'm not strong enough. My muscles and my tendons are not fully developed. Yet I'm trying to do 2 or 3 hours of practice on the field, and later on it leads to like a ACL rupture, or young kids throwing the ball, or hurting their shoulder because they're been throwing the ball for hours and hours and days in a row, that normally they would have done something different, as in maybe climbing a tree, going on their bike ride, getting dirty, pushing and pulling each other and being kids. So it feels that, now they're more into the performance, or we are into the performance. I need to do a marathon because it's my bucket list. But the truth is that you need to start running and build that volume to run and have fun, as opposed to no pain, no gain. My mind is so strong, which is, and you're going to make it. But how? We don't know, because you didn't spend enough time building. Building your body, building your strength, building the miles that you need to complete it. And actually, I don't want to say perform, but know that you had fun. Look, I pushed my body and I went to the limit, as in that was my preparation, and I was able to be my best. That's what the jujitsu. I know I lack the skill, but physically, I know that I'm doing my best, and it's not my physicality that is the limiting factor, but it's more the technical aspect and the tactical aspect that is lacking, which that I can learn through time. But the opposite, if I don't have it, a good foundation, sometimes that's where natural selection happens. Either you get hurt, either you get discouraged because you don't win, and that's a sport that is not for you. And maybe it's not the sport that is not for you, maybe it's the preparation that led you to that is not for you.
So good. What are, you could be one or three or just a few things that you want to encourage coaches to instill in either themselves or the clients that they're working with? Could be principles, just general orders of operation. What are your kind of like top 1 to 3
Falling in love
beliefs?
with the process, more and more falling in love with the process, that it becomes like breathing. As simple as that. You take a shower every morning or at night. I don't know when you take a shower. I take two, one in the morning, one at night. Anyway, that's part of me. You brush your teeth every day, at least once a day. What are the other things that you do that are part of your, it's part of our life to sit down and work. That's a must. We need to make money. But beyond that, what are the other things that kind of like elevate yourself? Not just, okay, I need to eat, bring me a pizza and let's eat. Or, oh, a coach said I need a protein, so give me a protein shake or a protein bar and we'll eat protein. You understand what I'm saying? It's more that, okay, can I understand what are the demands to nourish my body, right? So that I can have the energy, have the mental clarity, actually have a good digestion system, go to the bathroom at least daily. have that energy that I need in order for me to, if I want to play with kids and go for a run, awesome. If I want to practice jujitsu, great. If I want to go and play baseball, amazing. So falling in love with the process, understanding that we need to nurture the body, we need to challenge it. Sometimes we're too, how do you say, at ease, with our little routine. Yeah, I'll do curls and, legs and a little bit of cardio, but does that really challenge your body in order to adapt? And I'm not saying that you need to do crazy things every day. I'm just saying that what are the different vulnerable moments that you have or uncomfortable moments that you have? Because that's the only way that the body is going to grow and adapt, in any kind of area of your life. It could mean learning a new language where your brain is going to actually create new links, learning an instrument, playing the guitar, the piano, or you name it. Just having that, I guess, vulnerability and openness to become a beginner, adapt, learn, integrate things in order to master. Often we get very discouraged because, yeah, you're right. You're starting something new. Well, the odds are that you're not going to be good at it, that you're going to suck, that it's going to be difficult, that you're going to be the worst within the people that have been doing this for 3, 5, 10 years. So falling in love with that process, not being afraid of failing and trying something new. If really you resonate with that new thing, stick with it. Give it a chance. The chances are that you're not going to be good and it's going to take at least, I was going to say 6 to 12 months in order to become a bit more familiar. Just learning the names, I guess. If you're doing CrossFit, what is a thruster? What is a burpee? What is a kipping pull-up? What is a, snatch? What is a, you name it. Same idea with jujitsu. What is a kimura? What is a takedown? What is close guard, open guard? What is lapel? What is, gi, no gi? What are the points? I didn't get choked, but I lost. Why? No. So yeah, that I feel that would be, if we could understand that, that would remove so much stress into the performance. That would be remove so much stress into the I need to be perfect, because we're trying something new. Margin of error is quite big, and the probabilities that you're not going to succeed first time are much higher than the ones that you're going to succeed on the first try.
I love that so much. What's the new thing that you're excited about right now, personally?
Personally, I have the gym, the new space. It feels that it's everything that we've done from starting part-time coach to having that, I was going to say industrial space, to now. It kind of, for me, I'm a bit more conscious of how I can assist individuals in the process. Instead of imposing my will, as in, look, this is CrossFit, this is a methodology, this is what we need to do. No, it's not my methodology. It's where you're at today and what are the different principles we need in order for you to evolve and grow. Yeah, I'm so excited that, we're more in line with our what we want and how we can help individuals and how we can take them step by step, each and every single one, from the beginner, teenager or mom that has never trained in her life, to an elder that has, years and experience that wants to maintain their autonomy. Yeah, I'm excited. It feels that this space is allowing us to connect with more individuals like that. It's like basically the hub to connect worldwide.
I'm so happy for you. Where can people connect with you should they have interest? I'll obviously link everything in the podcast, but is there a preferred channel for how you'd want people to reach out to you?
Oh, whatever works for them, either going through our website, OPEX Montreal, or directly through my Instagram, Coach Mizar, or directly through email, Mizar at opexmontreal.ca. Any of these, just the first action is the hardest action to do. So send me a message. We can connect, talk. If it's a great fit, awesome. The like I said, first step is the hardest one, but once you made that decision for yourself, and that's where the adventure begins, and that's what matters. You.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mazar. I appreciate you. And Again, thank you for just being a really amazing example of what it looks like to be a professional coach out in the world, setting that standard. And we just appreciate you so much. And thank you for all that you do to support our community.
Thank you, Candice. It was a pleasure.